listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. I'm Cynthia, the pharmacist, and today you'll get your questions answered and your curiosity cured. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about colds because as the weather gets cooler and everybody starts huddling inside more, we start sharing more space, sharing more air, and then that leads to us sharing germs. Especially kids in school, if you work in close proximity to a lot of people, especially if you're in a situation where it's really hard to miss work if you're sick, so then you have to go to work sick. It can be really hard to make sure that you don't share germs and that you don't share in somebody else's germs and partake in that. So, talking about colds today, the cold virus, also called the Rhinovirus. Rhino is the Greek term for nose. And so I don't know if the Greeks knew what rhinoceroses were, but that's an easy way for me to kind of remember it in my head, because a rhinoceros has a large horn on their nose. A rhinovirus, the cold, kind of makes you feel like that. So rhinovirus in your nose, because that's the doorway that it likes to get into, is to get into your nose and attach to the lining of your nose. To start replicating and make you sick. If you remember anything about viruses from basic high school or college biology, viruses don't do a whole lot on their own. They always require a host cell to be able to replicate and do their work. One, that means the virus doesn't live very long on other stuff. A cold virus on a surface only lives about 3 hours. So if somebody's sick, coughs in their hand, or has germs on their hands, and they touch door handles and they touch surfaces, then that's only going to live about 3 hours. But when those places that may be germy are in high traffic areas, there's going to be a lot of people that touch that in a 3 hour span. So 3 hours, like, okay, that's not that long. But for high traffic things like handles, phones, countertops, things like that can be a lot of contact in 3 hours for you to contact that over and over again. The other thing about viruses is that they depend on your cells in your body to do their multiplication. So they get access into your body, the cells that they like, for the cold virus or the rhinovirus, it likes the lining of your upper respiratory system, so your nose, the back of your throat, your sinus passages. That's the place that they like to hang out. And so they get in there, they poke a hole in your cell and get inside, and then they use your cell's normal production system to replicate itself and to replicate its own DNA and make more little viruses, and then those viruses move out of those cells and then go and affect other cells. So during this high multiplication process, which is usually the first 3 days that the cold is in your body, is when you're the most contagious, which is unfortunate because you may not start showing symptoms until that 3rd day or later after you've been infected. So you're actually spreading the virus before you even know that you have it. It's in such a high replication mode that you can be shedding viruses from your body without knowing it. And then the cold, there's a lot of comparisons between flu and cold, and we may talk about that later, but cold symptoms: runny nose, scratchy throat, a little bit of cough, lots of sinus congestion, tiredness, not really a fever. Body aches can come with a cold sometimes, but it's usually just all that junk that ends up in your sinuses and in your throat is your symptoms of the cold. Yeah, I get morning sniffles like every day of the year. I know that that's not a cold, but usually people who get cold symptoms, they end up with a really sore throat because the tonsil glands in your throat are a major hub of your immune system. So it houses your white blood cells and all of those wonderful things that like to kill off bad things that get in your body. So when the virus gets in your nose, starts to replicate, you finally start getting symptoms. By the time you start getting symptoms, the first symptom that you're probably going to experience is sore or swollen throat, because the cells get infected by the virus and they send out a help signal, be like, help, I'm being attacked. So your immune system ramps up, and because these are the closest hub to your throat and your sinuses, that's going to be the main deploy location. And so it gets super activated, and they can get really swollen because they're having to work in overdrive to try to fight out what all is attacking your nasal passages. So you get a cold. You were probably spreading virus before you started experiencing symptoms, and still a little bit of spreading it while you have symptoms. So the number one thing you can do is to always wash your hands. Whether you're washing with soap and water or using hand sanitizer. If anybody's like me, like I touch my face a lot anyway, so then when I'm sick, I'm really having to touch my face because I'm having to use tissues, and I'm having to like cough to make sure like my spray just doesn't go for miles. And so all of this face touching leaves my hands contaminated, and so it's always important to wash your hands. The number one thing that you can do to keep from spreading your spray is to learn to sneeze or cough into your elbows. And this is something that I'm trying to teach my 3-year-old, and it's so funny to see her try to do. It's not a normal motion that you do, but I try to make it like superhero-esque and like interesting to her. So being able to get the crook of your elbow all the way over your nose and your mouth. And so it's probably going to muffle my speech, but to be able to get it covered up, the spray, now you may have to wash your arm off when you're done if you sneeze that way, but the spray isn't going to end up on your hands, especially for me working in a pharmacy. If I sneeze, even because of allergies and stuff, people are like, ooh. So being able to sneeze that way, I can make sure that I'm not spraying for miles, but I can also make sure that my hands stay clean. So if they see me touch something that may be potentially theirs, whether it's their paper or a pen that I may hand them or their bottle of medicine, I'm putting the lid on it, then they recognize that my hands stayed clean. So that's a good way to make sure that you're not just like spraying and you're eliminating a major point of contamination of your hands. So keeping your hands clean. If you do have to touch your face or you do catch a sneeze or a cough in your hands, washing your hands in soap and water, using hand sanitizer to kill those germs off of your hands to make sure. Using disinfecting wipes, whether you like Lysol or Clorox or some kind of homemade vinegar something solution to clean your surfaces, to make sure, especially if at work, if you have community services, like I work in a pharmacy, so sick people are always coming to and touching my surfaces. So we're constantly wiping down the surfaces where people touched, especially if we know for a fact that they were sick. We clean the surfaces again because the cold virus will live on surfaces for up to 3 hours, but in high traffic areas, a lot of contact can be in those areas in a 3-hour span. So that's a lot of people that could have touched it and not known. And then they touch it, their hands get dirty from touching the spot. Then they touch their hands or face just nonchalantly, not paying attention. And then 3 days later, they've got a cold too. So preventing that spread. One of the questions that gets asked a lot of times is, why don't they vaccinate for the cold? I've talked about vaccines before, but one of the things that they try to do when they prioritize vaccines is they want to vaccinate against things that can be really deadly, and colds really don't kill a lot of people. They make a lot of people miserable, they make a lot of people miss work, but they don't kill a lot of people. They also try to vaccinate against things that can spread rapidly. So things that are communicable, meaning that you get it from just like the spray of talking regularly or just like casual contact with face to hands and all of that stuff. So the flu, chickenpox, measles, all of those things that spread through that just casual contact with people. Third, they can make vaccines really easily against things that have characteristics that don't change very much. So we know that the flu virus mutates a lot on a regular basis, and that's why they have to develop a new vaccine each year to try to meet those mutations as best as they can. But there are certain fundamental things about the flu virus that doesn't change, so they can make sure that those things stay the same. The cold virus, there are 99 different versions of the cold virus that have been identified by scientists and people that study viruses, and every single one of them is fundamentally different. So there's not this fundamental anchor that they can make a vaccine on and then just kind of change the other things around it. So if we were going to vaccinate against the cold, you would have to get 99 vaccines. Thanks for listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. The pharmacy is now closed. You can post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/pharmanswerspod. Or you can email the show at pharmacistanswershere@gmail.com. You can tweet me or message me on Twitter @SinHendrix. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. Pharmacist Answers broadcasts live on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time on the Periscope app. You can follow me @SinHendrix or view in your web browser at periscope.tv/SinHendrix. See you next time on the Pharmacist Answers podcast.